Welcome to Royal Oak History 101. I'm David G. Penney. Another title for what I'm doing in this fifth class is Finding Your Royal Oak History. The way I proceed is to look at the various sources of information about Royal Oak history, books, pamphlets, websites, whatever there might be. And as you'll see, this will also include the Historical Museum, which we're very proud of in the Historical Society, and I think the whole city should be very proud of this museum. If you have questions you want to pose to me, you can email me at davidpenney@comcast.net. Just be careful of Penny, it's P-E-N-N-E-Y, like J.C. Penney, not like the coin. I've been teaching a class in Royal Oak history twice a year for about 5 or 6 years through the Royal Oak School District, the Churchill Community Education Center. And this class is a one-nighter, it's 2.5 hours. And I'll hopefully be doing that in the future. And this televised series of 5 classes will act as a kind of foundation or base upon which I can build in the class to talk about other details and interesting events and so on in Royal Oak history. I want to point out, as I always do, that we have books available on Royal Oak history which are supporting the Historical Museum. We have Royal Oak Twigs and Acorns Plus, a book of history, a hardbound book that sells for $40 and has 420 pages, and it was published in 2008. Also we have My Royal Oak, which is the most recent publication, Images from the 20th Century. It's primarily a picture book of 226 photos of Royal Oak. It sells for $25, and again, all proceeds go to the museum. And then we have 2 booklets, one on a walking tour of the Royal Oak and St. Mary cemeteries, and the other to walk that old Indian trail. And each of these are $5, and again, all the proceeds go to the museum. Where are we going today with this final class, the 5th class in the series? Well, I want to talk at some length about the Historical Museum. I want to talk about another book that's going to be coming out soon. It's all essentially written. It just needs to be sent to the printer, and that is something called, well, it's on Northwood Subdivision, and I have a tentative title which I'll show you a little later. I wanted to talk just a little bit about star bells, which I presented earlier, star bells, animal bells, and I'll talk a little bit about some miscellaneous images. There are just hundreds and hundreds of images of old Royal Oak that we could present, but I'm trying to keep it within the bounds of this class. Let's talk about our Historical Museum. The Historical Museum is located in old number 2 fire station on West Webster, the Northwood Fire Station, sometimes called. The land was originally donated by F. Lloyd Clawson. For some years now, the Historical Museum was located at Churchill School, and the school district allowed us to use a fairly large room there. It had formerly been, I believe, a wood shop, to keep our historical materials and display many of them, so that people could come in and view it. But it was clearly a kind of a holding pattern until we had a permanent structure that was set up expressly for the purpose of being a museum. This was the Historical Museum at Churchill. As you entered the door there, it was just another room in this very large, what was formerly a school. Here you see some of the displays. You can see a streetcar approaching on 4th Street, going east on 4th Street. In one of the pictures you can see other pictures of large groups of people. Some of the displays have to do with transportation, some have to do with George A. Dondero, and so on. Here's two photos that show 4th Street at the railroad, north of 6th Street. And you can see the railroad going across the photograph in the upper left, and the old wooden train station and the switch building on the opposite side of the tracks. In the other photograph, you can see 4th Street from a different angle. You can see the Washington Square building and so on. Here's two other photos that were produced and are on display at the museum. You can see 4th Street and Washington in a trolley coming up the street to turn at the corner where the bank was located onto 4th Street. In the other view, you can see Washington going south, actually going north, as a matter of fact. You can see Jacob Sparks's antenna for his radio station in the foreground on the right side. As I've said earlier, the demographics in Royal Oak have changed sharply over the last 30, 40 years, and we have many fewer school children, maybe less than a quarter than we did when the population peaked in the 1960s in Royal Oak. So many of the schools have been demolished. This is a plaque from Longfellow School. It was located on Maxwell Street, just north of 11 Mile Road. It says Longfellow School in 1920. Board of Education, George A. Dondero, President. H.D. Montgomery, Treasurer. Fred J. Lyon, Secretary. Guy H. Bradley, Trustee. And Dr. J.S. Morrison, much beloved physician in Royal Oak, was another trustee. Frank Hendry was the superintendent of schools, and here Frederick D. Madison was architect, and I already in an earlier class talked about Frederick D. Madison, how important he was to the building of schools in Royal Oak. So this is from the demolished Longfellow School. And here's a plaque from the Ben Franklin School, which was on Mohawk, south of Lincoln. And that school was demolished a few years ago. Built in 1927 during the heyday of building of schools in Royal Oak, the high school and almost a dozen elementary schools. This is an advertisement from the Baldwin Theater, antique advertisement showing various Hollywood personalities in a movie called All Quiet on the Western Front. It says At Last, the Motion Picture. So this is probably from the 20s, I would think. Here's an advertisement. On the right side, we have J.J. Levy, Jacob J. Levy. It says the world's finest gasoline. He operated Oakland County Gas and Oil Company. A really interesting character in town. I remember his gas stations as a boy. And there were several in Royal Oak. The Royal Oak Theater, always showing only the best, and Potter Moving and Storage, and so on. Here's a Royal Oak Flavor Company with some ladies in advertisements. I don't remember the Royal Oak Flavor Company, but it's an advertisement calendar from 1947. Okay, what about the number 2 fire station? The historical collection has been moved to the fire station. This is the fire station as it was seen in 1940 on Northwood, on Webster in the Northwood subdivision. The Congregational Church, which is now located on what would be the left side of the fire station, wasn't there as yet. It had not moved from downtown as yet. here's the fire station seen from a little different angle. You can see the beautiful hose tower at the back for drying hose. And you can see men standing in front of a fire truck on the door to the left. And you can actually see the brass pipe that the men came down from the second floor. They slept on the second floor. And in fact, if you do a blow up, you can see the brass pipe there behind the car. And on the right, you can see my dad coming down the brass pole, I should call it, rather than pipe, from the second floor. That photograph was used by the city in a report on the various city departments in the late 1940s. Sort of a poster boy for the fire department there. These photos are found in My Royal Oak, the book with the yellow margin. Here's a photograph of the fire station taken in 2008, so very recent, when it was still being used as kind of a reserve fire station. But now and here is just more recently, late last year, when the building was being renovated. It took a lot of work. The heating plant was completely redone. The inside had to be modernized because it was a building that was built in the 1920s. Very, very solid building, but it didn't have a lot of the electrical and amenities and plumbing amenities that it needed. So these had to be brought up to code and up to a point where the building could be used as a museum. And in fact, an elevator had to be installed. And you can see here's a man who is working around the new entrance to the elevator. And the elevator was actually installed in the base of the old hose tower. Okay, now here's, this is in the fall, Royal Oak Historical Museum. You can see in the background the First Congregational Church building, which is there. Here's the First Congregational Church building from looking at it from the side facing Crooks Road. And this is the Congregational Church as it was until the mid-1950s, when here it's on the corner of the north east corner of 3rd Street and Center. And they gave up this site, and a bank building was built there, and they moved out to the site where it is now on the corner of Crooks Road and Webster. This church was founded in 1842. This is so it may be the 3rd or 4th oldest church in Royal Oak. The oldest being the Methodist Church, and followed very closely on its heels by the First Baptist Church. Another sign showing the imminent opening of the Royal Oak Historical Museum at the No. 2 fire station. Work had to be done around the walls of the station to waterproof the walls because the station has a basement. The heating plant is in the basement. Other amenities are there, so they didn't want water coming in, so work had to be done on that. This is October 2009. Here they're waterproofing, backfilling. This is on the 2nd floor, showing the elevator that's been, looks like completed on the right-hand side there as you come up the stairs to the 2nd floor. So it goes between the 1st floor and the 2nd floor, so it provides barrier-free entrance for the building. And here we see the room that was the dormitory where the men slept on the 2nd floor. As you'll see in a moment, this is now filled with museum materials that have been brought over from Churchill School. This is the bathroom. There was a shower, actually a tub shower arrangement. And there's a lot of dust around here because it's still under construction at this point. Again, more construction going on, a lot of dust. The room in the front, which is going to be used as a library, had to be stripped and then restained and so on. And you'll see in a moment what's been done. Here, Abraham Lincoln has moved in, so to speak. This is some of the boxes and things that have been brought over from Churchill. This is the second floor dormitory. Here's the first floor. This picture was taken very, very recently, showing the museum being organized and the showcases being, display cases being set up. The collection of Daily Tribune newspapers are in the back there, on the back right-hand side. The front, the doors in the front where the trucks would go in and out have been additionally insulated with plastic. This is the library that's been repainted, and the wood paneling has been restained. This will be a place where many of the books will be stored. The new first floor entrance to the elevator. Now a new book is going to be coming out very soon. I'd mentioned it earlier. It's on Northwood subdivision and the Clausen family. It's a book that will cover many topics in the life of Northwood subdivision. First of all, it will cover, in a very brief manner, what Furman Clausen, a dentist who worked at what it would now be the Detroit Medical Center in the 19th century, did when he came out to Royal Oak and bought up a large area of what is now Northwood subdivision. And his son, F. Lloyd Clausen, who continued with that work and who became a city commissioner and eventually became mayor of Royal Oak. So it'll have to do with what was done by the Clausen family in developing Northwood subdivision. It'll also have to do with the Benjamins, located where the house was located on Woodward Avenue opposite Oakview Cemetery. That's the Benjamin farm. Here's a photograph of Northwood. It says Northwood, the home site beautiful. It's actually showing the intersection of Woodward Avenue and 12 Mile Road. And in the distance you can see Northwood Boulevard, and you can see the site. It's just a field there where the Shrine of the Little Flower Roman Catholic Church was later built. And there already are some houses there, most of which still exist in the Northwood subdivision. But of course, many, many more have been added since the development. And it shows the prices of the various lots here. This is a view, colorized, black and white photograph of Northwood Boulevard. And it's really quite beautiful, quite beautifully landscaped. And it's the major street in the Northwood subdivision. This is 1927. The photograph was given to me for use in the book that'll be out soon by Therese Chrisman, who is the daughter of F. Lloyd Clausen. This is also a part of Northwood Boulevard going farther east, and it shows the building of the viaduct when the Grand Trunk Western Railroad was relocated in 1930. Rather than running up Woodward Avenue on the east side, it was relocated so the line went straight through Royal Oak and up to Birmingham. And so a number of viaducts had to be built at 12 Mile Road, at 11 Mile Road, at Northwood Boulevard, at 13 Mile, 14 Mile, and so on. And you can see the viaduct supports built here. This is the viaduct at 12 Mile Road. It's actually the longest viaduct, and it actually accommodates both Vincetta Boulevard and 12 Mile. been set on in the two outside kind of lanes, and 12 Mile on the two center ones. This is the crossing of Woodward at 12 Mile Road, and you can see the complication here. On the far left, you have the railroad tracks, which are running along Woodward. This is before they were relocated in 1930 to the more to the east, with the building of the viaducts. You have the interurban and trolley tracks toward the center of the picture, to the west of the railroad tracks. Then, of course, you have Woodward Avenue traffic, automobiles and trucks. So in crossing Woodward Avenue at this point, you had to watch out for trains, for interurbans, and for cars and trucks going both directions. So it was really quite a complicated crossing. Here's a photograph showing the building of the Shrine of the Little Flower. Again, this photograph is, most of these that we're looking at now were contributed by Therese Chrisman. And so we thank her for the use of these photographs. This photograph happens to be in my Royal Oak Images from the 20th Century. It's on page 26. Then here's the pictures I think I showed in another earlier class of Father Hutting, who wrote the book on in the 30s on the construction of the Shrine of the Little Flower, and Father Coughlin and 3 other priests who worked at the shrine during that time. This is the St. Sebastian Grotto at the shrine. It's also an image that's in my Royal Oak on page 81. I wanted to say just a little more about star bells. I am lucky enough to have a couple of star bells. This is and these bells, as I said earlier, were used to keep track of animals in the early years before many fences were put up and the animals could roam freely. This is a number 4 star bell. It's the same one that's in the picture. The larger the number, the larger the bell. So you might have a very large bell for a cow or a horse, and you'd have much smaller bells for maybe goats or sheep. So that's a number 4. Actually, I do have a number 5 right here. Yeah, this is number 5. I'm not sure how high the numbers went, but they certainly, some of the bells were much smaller than this. I just don't happen to have any of the really small ones. So that was, as I said, the earliest industry in Royal Oak, the manufacture by Orson Starr and his son Almond of these animal bells. Totally by hand. There was no complicated machinery or automatic machinery or robots or anything at that time. It was all done by hand. I wanted to mention some miscellaneous images. This is the same one of the John Benjamin farm. It's obviously pre-automotive automobile. We see in the background a buggy. We see some geese in the foreground. We see a pump over to the left. Rather pleasant farm scene. Here is the intersection at Woodward and 13 Mile Road. And I think at this point we're looking kind of southwest here. We can see the railroad tracks on the extreme left. We can see the interurban tracks. And then we see, again, the road where the cars and trucks would drive. And there's a gasoline station over on the other side there on what would be, I guess, the north west corner of 13 Mile and Woodward. This is a picture that it often brings disbelief, that there were actually several small lakes, we could call them ponds, in Royal Oak at one time. This was the Hilsinger Pond. It was located close to where the 44th District Court building is now stands. We don't know exactly how big it was. We can see this picture. The picture is kind of damaged from whatever. But there's a woman and two small children out in a boat. Looks like probably a handmade boat on this pond. And we don't have a date for it exactly. But the Hilsingers owned quite a bit of land over there, including this pond. They had orchards and so on. And of course, William Hilsinger built the first power generator in Royal Oak near the corner of 11 Mile and Main Street, and lit up a number of street lights and other things around the turn of the century, before electric power came in from distant main sources. Here's a streetcar, and this would be 1940, so this is pretty late. Streetcars were losing out, and interurbans were losing out to automobiles. This is one of the last ones we might see. This is on Catalpa, just slightly west of Main Street, where the trolleys turned around, or they maybe didn't turn around. The man just walked to the other end and drove it from the other end back toward Detroit. This says Royal Oak on the front, as you can see. This is the post office building, beautiful Art Deco eagle at the top. This is the same building in which I mentioned in an earlier class that there were bas-reliefs of people that were produced during the 1930s, the late 1930s, but which are now gone, lost entirely. But this building is still there, and this eagle is still there. Go and take a look at it. This is a fire. As you probably gather by now, I have quite an affection and attachment to the fire department since my dad was a fire captain. This was a fire that he was not involved in, but it was a warehouse on 10 Mile Road, and it was a very ferocious kind of fire, as you can see, enormous amount of flame and heat. And they had to keep backing the trucks away from the fire, and actually blistered the paint on the trucks because of just the radiant heat coming from it. And here you can see this hook and ladder truck with its ladder up and a water cannon at the top. These are the antique signs that are were located at the corner of Crooks Road and Main Street. They were up until a year or two ago, and they're not there now. I'm wondering what's going on. It shows Clawson being 2 miles away, Pontiac 16 miles away, Royal Oak 1 mile. That would mean the center of town, 4th and Main Street, Detroit 12 miles, and so on, Lake Orion 24. Very interesting. I mean, there were no iPhones where you could go to Google Earth and find out exactly where things were at that time. You used these little signs to tell you which way to go and how far it was. Well, I want to thank you for being a good viewer and continuing to watch this series. This is the end of the 5th class on Royal Oak History 101. Until next time, thank you very much. This is David Penney signing off.